Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Boruto video. This is going to be my speculation ahead of Boruto Chapter 61, which is coming out on August 18th this month. So the chapters usually come out on the 20th, but we're actually getting it 2 days earlier. So yeah, I usually record these speculation videos about sort of 10 days before the new chapter. It's only 8 days this time. But I don't think we've seen any spoilers yet for the chapter, so you know we're still just going off what we already know. So as usual, we're going to be primarily going off sort of, okay, we've had a few weeks now to reflect on the last chapter. Where do things look like they're sort of heading going forward? So the last chapter I thought was a bit better than sort of the previous two or three. But we're definitely still in this kind of setup period where it feels like they're still sort of stretching out the story. I'm not really sure that this is working so well, because while it's good stuff, we're definitely waiting for something to happen, for things to kick into gear. So the chapter that we're going to be getting in 8 days is, I think, going to be the second of 4 chapters for a volume. So my expectations would be that I think it will be a stronger chapter than 60, the previous chapter, but that it still probably won't quite have the big reveal moments we've been waiting for, and it will probably be more on the second half of the volume, so chapter 62 and 63. Those chapters will be the ones where we really, I think, have to kick into gear. Because if this chapter is another setup chapter like the previous ones, then we have basically had 6 chapters worth of setup. That's half a year's worth of content on just in-between arc stuff. And while I'm not going to say nothing has happened, nothing, I think, super of note has happened, and we're just waiting, okay, when are you going to activate the story? So let's get into some of the details here. So at the very start of this chapter 60, the reveal was that Code has placed his sort of band kind of claw marks, is what they're calling them, basically outside every single one of the great kind of ninja villages. So because we know he can travel to wherever his claw marks are, he's basically saying to all of the villages, I can appear here whenever I want to, because I suppose theoretically they don't really have a way to remove the claw marks. And he's basically also telling them that I put them there so I can also just go to that village and you won't know I'm there. So that's just a setup for, he's putting everyone on edge. We already know the plan is to wait until a moment where things are very chaotic with the different nations, especially the Leaf Village, and that's when they're going to strike, because they know a head-on strike against sort of a fortified enemy isn't going to go well for them, even though they're very, very powerful. So that's just the first couple of pages with like Shikamaru and Sai and so on. With the Sumire and Amado stuff, the main takeaways were that he still has something secret that he wants to discuss with Kawaki, sort of personally, one-on-one. Don't really know what that is. I'm still very interested in that, because the general sort of speculation now, I think, is very much around, what's the deal with Amado? Now, after, I think, the previous chapter, we were maybe thinking, is this going to be the chapter where 60 was going to be the chapter where they reveal, like, he's actually secretly a villain or something like that? They definitely pulled back on that, in that their reveal was like, you know, he was kind of teasing like, oh, you don't want to investigate further, Sumire, or you'll like regret it. You know, are you really going to be an idiot here? And then the reveal was just like, hey, stop questioning me. I have the village's best interest at heart. There is something secret I want to discuss with Kawaki, but it has to be private. And I've created a new kind of ally for the village, and we cut to a kind of pod that I'm guessing has a cyborg inside. I think most of the speculation has been that it's probably going to be Delta. Now, I do wonder the specifics on this, in the sense that we know he deactivated Delta just before I think he left for the Leaf Village and that whole kind of thing happened. So I guess the idea is he can remote reactivate Delta, bring her back here, or has something else happened? I'm not really sure. I think Delta being on the good side, would that be it would be interesting, I suppose. It'd be a bit of a surprise, but we'll see what happens. It would also add to the whole idea of the whole Amado and his daughter thing, and if it is Delta, it would make sense as well. I think a lot of that speculation comes from the fact that you can see a sort of a shadow behind the glass over the face, and it looks like either the head is quite big or the person has kind of big hair, and we know sort of Delta's hair is kind of quite big, so that's another part of that speculation. And yeah, we're saying this one should become a powerful Konoha ally. So, you know, I hope we get the reveal on something like that next chapter. There's a bunch of things in this chapter where it feels like, okay, are you going to tell us the answer to this in the next chapter, or is it going to be more and more teasing? Because they're in it, like I said before, it feels like they're in full-on stretch out the story as much as possible mode at this stage. So I'm not entirely confident that they're going to get straight to the point as soon as possible. So is that. On the Code, Ada, and Daemon side of things, the main tease we got here is just that, again, Code slightly more explained his abilities, but we already basically knew what he said. Daemon, I suppose through Ada, reveals that there is actually more to his ability than we knew about before. What we were told is that basically he has a sort of like attack reflection ability where if someone comes at him with an intent to kill, he reflects that intent to kill and their planned attack back on them, so they effectively kill themselves. So Daemon was about to explain to Code that, well, actually there's something more to it, but Ada stops him because she still, I suppose, is keeping some cards close to her chest. And similarly, she teases the idea that she actually might have another ability in addition to her sort of clairvoyance and her ability to, you know, have everyone be attracted to her. So that's really cool because like she already has two hugely powerful abilities. So the idea that she has more is actually really, really interesting. But again, they're still just kind of teasing the idea of like, what are we going to do next? What are we actually, you know, setting up for? When are they actually going to sort of plan their attack? We don't really know. Next, we obviously get that Kawaki is given Boruto's headband because, of course, Boruto has Sasuke, so Boruto gives his own personal one to Kawaki, establishing that nice connection. And this is another thing that is a kind of personal item that attaches Kawaki to the village. In a chapter where he was feeling a bit out of place because he's always being sort of spied on, this in combination with the family meal at home, what Naruto says to him, the conversation they have just before they go to sleep, all this stuff is stuff that really highlights to Kawaki that he actually has found a place where he can feel at home. So any sort of doubts and the whole idea of like there's no place for you here in the village, that was the big theme of the chapter from Kawaki's perspective, seems like it was resolved because the cliffhanger of the chapter is, you know, we've had this tease for the last few chapters of Amado kind of presenting the idea, Kawaki, I can reactivate your karma mark, kind of in the same way Code has it, where there's no risk of an Otsutsuki being reborn in you, but you'll gain the power of the karma mark once again, just as a weapon. Do you want it? And we've been teasing and teasing it. Will he take the easy path because he seems to not particularly like the shinobi training? Boruto and he had a fight about that a few chapters ago. Now, at the end of this chapter, what he says is, let me get the exact line here. Where is it? Yep. Give me a break. I don't need no karma. And then he says, there's still one thing that I can do to protect Konoha and Lord 7. So, combination of things here. One, he is not immediately planning to get the karma. That's good. That changes Amado's idea of him seemingly wanting to sort of force that onto Kawaki. It makes sense that even though Amado did everything he could to explain the idea that there's no real downside to it, it's just you get this power. But of course, for Kawaki personally, that karma means a lot. That it's more than just an ability. That was the thing that made him the vessel. Him not having that mark anymore gives him a sense of freedom, so he would never, you know, the character feels like would never really choose to get that again. But we know he does get it again, so how and when does that happen? That's still the question. So, there's still one thing that I can do to protect Konoha and Lord Seventh. This is interesting because my immediate thing that I think of, especially based on the anime recently, is Kawaki maybe going to leave the village or something like that? But that doesn't really make sense with regards to like the villain setup that we have at this point. Jigen's gone, so the significance of Kawaki being the vessel isn't super significant anymore for the most part, because Code's plan is that he wants to basically kill the people who killed Jigen or Ishiki. So he wants to kill like Boruto, Naruto, Kawaki, and Sasuke. I think it was those 4 characters, and probably Amado, I think, as well. So Kawaki leaving on his own isn't really going to change all that much. He's still sort of one of Code's targets. So they sort of have to know that deep down, that Code is going to be coming for Naruto specifically. So him separating himself from Naruto isn't really going to change all of that much. Now, might this link into the idea of, does he take Naruto somewhere to specifically protect him? But he's close enough with Boruto now where I can't see him just leaving Boruto to the wayside. So, and he also doesn't have the karma power anymore, so he can't just take Naruto to like another dimension or something like that. So the tease, the big cliffhanger is, what is this one thing that Kawaki can do to protect both the village and Lord Seventh from whatever threat is coming? Given that he's just said he's not going to get the karma mark as an ability to protect the village, and like I've explained, it doesn't really make a lot of sense that he'd sort of leave on his own, because he's not powerful enough to take out Code, and if he just sort of hides out away from the village himself, that doesn't really change all that much, because Code then just has 2 separate places to go to target the people that he wants to take out. It's definitely interesting, especially because the core of this chapter was doubly, triply convincing Kawaki your place is the village. And the fact that he says he wants to protect the village highlights that he cares. So, you know, this is a very different situation than like other kind of times we've kind of seen this before. There's a small little page here in this chapter with Boruto where he just kind of looks at his hand. Specifically, it seems like the karma mark on his hand, and it's just ... And I don't know if they were trying to say something about the pills he's taking beginning to work or have an effect or something like that, or just Boruto is constantly in thought about having the karma mark, and the idea of him sort of being that ticking time bomb of, when he's fully Otsutsukified, Momoshiki can just take over. What's going to happen to him? There's a lot of doubts in that place. But in general, with the manga at this point, it is notable that Boruto, over the last 6 chapters, hasn't been super involved. It's felt like he's only really had a significant role in maybe 3 out of the last 6 chapters, whereas Kawaki has been a centerpiece of the series since his proper introduction, basically. So I definitely would want Boruto to come back into things in a more significant way. I wouldn't mind them having a chapter to do more with Sarada, and I think this is probably the biggest complaint you could probably have about the series, doing what it's doing right now. It's had 6 chapters of setup going into the future, yet it's used barely any of that time to do more with Sarada, with Mitsuki, or any other character really. Like we had 2 or 3 pages with Shikadai a chapter or 2 ago, just highlighting his dynamic with Kawaki, but you're not really doing much with Sarada, who has a skill set, is a character who should be significant. Same with Mitsuki, has a very interesting dynamic. Do something with him. But we're not really, because the manga seems to have definitely taken the approach that it's going to be very light. It'll bring up Sarada big moments when we get to the big moments, and then they'll leave the anime to do the proper build and setup for them. So, you know, we'll see where we're going with that. So, what do I think they're going to do with the next chapter? Well, based off this chapter, you'd assume they're going to have to do a few things like, 1, will they have Amado finally have a conversation with Kawaki and reveal what the private thing that he wants to say to him is? I'm not sure. They've been teasing that for so long now, they could do that whenever. Will they reveal who the person in the pod is, the new ally for Konoha. Will it be Delta? Is that a next chapter thing to do? I certainly would not think, if it is Delta, that is a volume ending thing to do. So if it is just Delta, do that next week. I don't really see the need to do anything more than that. That would just bring her into play. It would have Amado be able to interact with her and build up that dynamic, characterize Amado a little bit more. That's fine. I also don't think they're going to reveal what Daemon and Ada's kind of the full scope of their abilities are. That seems like in the middle of the action they'll do that when we get to that eventually. So I see that being a lot more long-term setup. And then I suppose more significantly, will they reveal what the one thing that he can do Kawaki moment is? Again, I don't know. Kawaki has been a centerpiece of all the chapters, and I can't see them just moving away from him too much, so he'll get at least, half of the focus of the chapter at least. And I think, based on how you set it up here, there has to be at least a tease, a lead into what he's actually planning to do. And we'll see exactly what that is. There's still the idea of... they said they were doing training, yet they have still not told us what specific type of training any of the characters are doing, in terms of, is there a specific move that they're trying to learn, or is it just general training as we build eventually towards the time skip, which has been a thing that I think has fallen a little bit to the wayside over the last few chapters, as we've sort of, I think, realized that, okay, we're definitely doing sort of a final arc before we go into a time skip, but how long is that going to be? So there's a lot of that stuff, and there's other things, like we're still waiting for Sasuke to re-enter the story. That's something we're still sort of waiting to see, like them fully go a little bit more in depth into, like how Naruto feels having lost Kurama, the exact scope of his powers. I think Amado was at last chapter, not last chapter, but the one before, did say that in his mind, Naruto would lose the fight against Code if he had it with this kind of ability. So there's that. Boruto and the side effects, I don't really know what they're doing there. And then there's obviously the Jogan, which we're expecting them to introduce at some point, but who knows at this point. I don't think anyone really has a clue what the plan is for the Jogan, outside of very broad things about it. And then it gets into, I suppose, just Code's plan. When is he finally going to activate the plan? What will be the event that finally makes Code go, now's the time to strike? Because right now it feels like he has to be the one to initiate an incident that would cause enough chaos for him to strike, but he doesn't really have enough people to necessarily cause that. So what's the idea here? Is the real question. Are we going to get introduced to another kind of enemy character, another cyborg? I don't think we will, but it does feel like there has to be something else. And this maybe gets into Kashin Koji's return or something like that as well. We're waiting for him to return also. But yeah, there's just a lot up in the air, and it means that the manga's in this spot where my prediction, based off the last few chapters, is that we're probably going to get a little bit more of the same, maybe a slight improvement over the last chapter, but they could choose at any point in the upcoming chapters to just open up the plot and it just go into sort of overdrive, and we have a very eventful end to this volume to go into, I suppose, a more super action-packed following volume. And that's the thing, it's hard, you can't really predict at this point when they're going to pull the trigger on it's happening right now, because they're doing training. They're not focusing much on the training. They're doing all of this subtle setup work with Amado's up to something, Kawaki has some decisions to make, Boruto is dealing with, potential side effects of pills and so on. The villains are just plotting the exact moment to strike. All of these are plots where you could go boom, and what if Code attacks at a point where Boruto begins to really suffer with the side effects. At the same time, Kawaki does something that maybe puts the village at risk, and at the same time as X happens, you know, that sort of thing. So, I think that's pretty much all I want to say. I don't want to go on too much longer here because it just is a situation where it's very, very difficult to call exactly what the chapter is going to be. But in general, my prediction is that I think we're going to get mostly the same, with the hope that, say, a reveal of Delta or a new cyborg character on the good guy side of things as potentially being the big moment to make the chapter feel a little bit more eventful. But ultimately, I'm kind of just expecting more of the same, and for them to maybe stretch out the Kawaki, what's he going to do reveal until the final chapter of this volume. So my expectations are maybe a little bit lower than they maybe should be, but keeping expectations in check means that if the chapter delivers, it will really deliver because my expectations were low. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on this upcoming chapter, Boruto Chapter 61, coming out officially on August 18th. So again, a little bit earlier than usual. Remember, it's the 18th, not the 20th this month. But yeah, let me know what your thoughts are on the upcoming chapter. That's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.